Stop talking about what you're going to do. You're literally emptying your success tank every time you open your mouth to share your plans. The human brain has a finite amount of achievement energy, and every time you get that hit of satisfaction from sharing your intentions, you're spending energy that should have gone into actual progress. This isn't just motivational talk. It's backed by neuroscience. The same part of your brain that lights up when you achieve something also lights up when you talk about achieving something. The problem? Your brain can't tell the difference, so it gives you the reward either way. But only one of those paths leads to real results. There was once a dream so precious that someone held it close to their heart, never speaking it aloud, nurturing it in silence until it bloomed into an achievement that changed millions of lives. That dream could have died in a single moment, premature sharing, withered under the harsh light of skepticism, or been crushed by the weight of others' expectations. But it didn't, because sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones no one sees coming. I think about the last time you shared a goal before you were ready. How did it feel when people questioned it, when they offered their opinions, when they started watching your every move, waiting to see if you would succeed or fail? And or more importantly, how did their energy affect your own commitment to that goal? The truth that no one talks about is that most great achievements are born in silence. They're nurtured in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when you're alone with your thoughts, your dreams, and your determination. These are the moments that shape your destiny. But they're also the moments most people rush to share, to announce, to validate through others' reactions. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. How many of your dreams have died because you exposed them too soon? How many goals have lost their power because you traded the energy of action for a temporary satisfaction of talking about them? There's a profound difference between moving in silence and moving in secrecy. Silence is about protection, protecting your dreams from premature exposure, protecting your energy from unnecessary drainage, protecting your focus from external distractions. Secrecy is about fear. We're not talking about hiding. We're talking about growing. Consider a seed planted in the earth. It doesn't announce its intentions. It doesn't send out press releases about its plans to become a mighty oak. It simply does the work, silently, consistently drawing nutrients from the soil, pushing through obstacles, growing stronger day by day. And one day, without fanfare or announcement, it breaks through the surface, already strong enough to withstand the elements. Your dreams deserve the same chance to take root and grow strong before facing the world's judgment. But in today's world of constant sharing, of social media updates and status reports, of turning every small step into a public announcement, we've lost the art of moving in silence. The cost of this loss is greater than most people realize. Every time you share a goal prematurely, you risk a little bit of the energy that should have gone into achieving it. Every time you seek validation for your dreams before they're ready to stand on their own, you risk having them shaped by others' expectations rather than your own vision. Think about the most significant transformations you've witnessed in others, the ones that truly impressed you. Notice how often they seem to happen almost overnight. Not because they were quick, but because the person did the work quietly, consistently, away from the spotlight, until the results were undeniable. This isn't about being secretive or antisocial. It's about understanding the power of focused, undiluted energy. When you're building something important, whether it's a business, a skill, a relationship, or a transformation, every ounce of energy matters. And in the early stages, that energy is often better invested in action than conversation. Let me share something that might challenge your current approach to goals and dreams. The moment you share a goal, you create an audience. And with that audience comes pressure, pressure to perform, pressure to prove, pressure to meet expectations. Sometimes this pressure can be motivating, but often it becomes an additional burden you have to carry while trying to do the actual work. Have you ever noticed how some of your most satisfying achievements were the ones that surprised others? The ones where people didn't see the work until they saw the results. There's a reason for that. When you move in silence, you get to focus all your energy on the work itself rather than managing others' expectations and reactions. But here's the part that most people miss. Moving in silence isn't just about avoiding external pressure. It's about creating space for deep, meaningful work. It's about giving yourself permission to experiment, to fail, to adjust course without having to explain or justify every decision. It's about maintaining the purity of your vision without it being diluted by well-meaning advice or skepticism. Think about the last time you worked on something without telling anyone. Remember how different it felt? How much clearer your thinking was? how much more connected you were to your own intuition and judgment. That's the power of silence in action. Let's talk about something that might be hard to hear. The world doesn't need to know about your dreams until your dreams become your reality. The energy you spend telling people about what you're going to do is energy you're not spending on actually doing it. Consider the basic physics of achievement. Every goal, every dream, every aspiration you have requires energy to become reality. That energy is finite. You only have so much of it each day. And every time you talk about what you're going to do, you're spending energy that could have gone into doing it. But it goes deeper than just energy conservation. When you share your goals prematurely, you create a complex web of external pressures and expectations that can actually work against your success. Let me show you how this happens. First, there's the false sense of achievement. When you tell someone about your goals, their positive reaction can trigger a reward response in your brain. You get a small hit of satisfaction just from sharing your intentions. This might feel good in the moment, but it can actually reduce your motivation to do the actual work. Your brain has already gotten reward, so it's less driven to pursue the real achievement. Then there's the pressure of expectations. Once you've told people what you're going to do, you've created an audience. Now, you're not just working on your goal, you're performing for others. Every setback becomes more stressful because you're not just dealing with your own disappointment. You're also managing others' perceptions. Think about how different it feels to work on something when no one knows about it. There's a freedom there, isn't there? A purity of purpose. You're not doing it for the recognition or to prove anything to anyone. You're doing it because it matters to you. Here's a question that might make you think. When was the last time you accomplished something significant without announcing it first? How did it feel when you finally revealed your achievement? Notice the difference in the quality of that satisfaction compared to the shallow pleasure of talking about future plans. The reality is that most people aren't equipped to support your dreams in the early stages. Not because they don't care, but because dreams in their infancy are fragile things. They need protection, nurturing, and most importantly, they need space to grow strong enough to withstand outside influences. When you share a dream too soon, you expose it to forces it might not be ready to handle. Well-meaning friends might offer advice that pulls you off course. Skeptics might plant seeds of doubt that take root in your mind. Even supporters can inadvertently create pressure that changes how you approach your goal. But here's what happens when you move in silence. You get to stay purely connected to your own vision. You get to work through the early challenges without the added weight of others' expectations. You get to fail, adjust, and try again without having to explain or justify every decision. Think about the most successful people you know. Not the ones who are always talking about what they're going to do, but the ones who consistently get things done. Notice how often they surprise people with their achievements rather than their announcements. This isn't about being secretive or antisocial. It's about understanding that there's a right time to share, and that time is usually after you've built enough momentum to be unstoppable. It's about recognizing that your dreams deserve a protected space to grow strong. Let me share something powerful about the psychology of silent achievement. When you move in silence, you develop a different kind of confidence. It's not the fragile confidence that comes from others' approval or encouragement. It's the solid, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you can do the work whether anyone is watching. This kind of confidence changes everything. It changes how you approach challenges, how you handle setbacks, how you measure success. Because when you're not performing for an audience, you get to define success on your own terms. But there's another aspect of moving in silence that most people never consider. It gives you the space to develop your own voice, your own style, your own way of doing things. When you're not constantly seeking input and approval from others, you get to explore approaches that might seem unconventional but work perfectly for you. Think about any creative process, so whether it's art, business, innovation, or personal transformation. The early stages are often messy, experimental, full of false starts and adjustments. This is natural and necessary. But when you have an audience watching, you might feel pressured to make these early stages look more polished than they should be. Moving in silence gives you permission to be messy, to try things that might not work, to take detours that might lead to unexpected breakthroughs. It gives you the freedom to focus on the work itself rather than how the work appears to others. Here's a truth that might change how you approach your next big goal. The energy you preserve by not talking about your dreams becomes fuel for achieving them. Every time you resist the urge to share prematurely, you're banking energy that can be invested in actual progress. Consider the difference between potential energy and kinetic energy. When you talk about what you're going to do, you're dealing in potential energy, the possibility of action. But when you move in silence, you convert that energy directly into kinetic energy, actual movement, actual progress, actual results. There's a profound moment that happens in every person's life, a moment when they realize that all their talk about success, all their declarations of intention, all their public promises have actually been holding them back. For some, this realization comes after years of announcing goals that never materialize. For others, it comes in that quiet moment of reflection, when they notice their most significant achievements were the ones they never talked about. Let me share something about the nature of transformation that few people understand. Real change happens in the dark, not in the spotlight of social media, not in the encouraging comments of well-wishers, not in the motivational groups where everyone shares their intentions. It happens in those private moments when you're alone with your commitment, your effort, and your determination. Think about how many times you've heard someone say they're going to change their life. They announce it boldly, share it widely, maybe even start a blog or a social media account to document their journey. Now think about how many of those announcements actually led to lasting change. There's an inverse relationship between how much people talk about changing and how much they actually change. Here's what happens when you announce your intentions too, sis. You create a gap between your current reality and your declared future state. This gap becomes a stage where others get to watch and comment on your progress or lack thereof. The pressure of this audience can actually make it harder to bridge that gap, because now you're not just dealing with the challenge of change itself. You're also managing a performance. But when you move in silence, something different happens. The only gap you have to worry about is the one between where you are and where you want to be. No audience, no commentary, no pressure to make the process look good for others. Just you doing the work day after day until the change becomes undeniable. Consider the metaphor of a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. If you try to help it by breaking open the cocoon, you actually doom it to failure. The struggle to emerge is what gives it the strength to fly. Your personal transformation works the same way. The private struggle, the silent effort, the unseen work, these are what give you the strength to sustain your changes. I'm asking you something that might make you uncomfortable. How many times have you killed your own dreams by exposing them to the wrong environment too soon? How many times have you let others' doubts become your own simply because you shared your vision before it was strong enough to withstand scrutiny? The most powerful transformations often look like nothing is happening until suddenly everything has changed. It's like watching a bamboo shoot grow. For the first few years, it appears dormant, showing little visible progress. But underground, it's developing an extensive root system. Then when it's ready, it can grow up to 3 feet in a single day. Your dreams, your goals, your aspirations need that same kind of protected growth, period. They need time to develop strong roots before they face the winds of public opinion. They need space to grow in the direction that's right for them, not in the direction others think they should. Here's what most people don't understand about moving in silence. It's not just about avoiding external pressure or protecting your dreams from negativity. It's about maintaining the purity of your motivation. When you work in silence, you're forced to confront your true reasons for pursuing your goals. Are you doing this for the recognition or for the actual achievement? Are you more interested in having done something or in doing it? These questions become crystal clear when there's no audience to perform for. Think about the most meaningful changes you've made in your life, the ones that really stuck. Notice how many of them happened quietly, almost privately, before you ever shared them with the world. That's not a coincidence. That's the power of silent transformation at work. This principle becomes even more important when you're working on something truly innovative or different. The world has a way of trying to force new ideas into old molds, of trying to make the unprecedented fit into existing categories. By moving in silence, you give your innovative ideas space to develop their own shape, their own form, their own identity. Consider how many groundbreaking achievements throughout history were developed in relative silence before they changed the world. The creators didn't waste energy defending their unfinished work or explaining their process to skeptics. They simply did the work, refined their ideas, and let the results speak for themselves. In fact, many of the most impactful innovations came from people who understood the power of protected development. They knew that great ideas are like delicate seedlings. They need time in the shade before they can withstand the harsh light of public scrutiny. These innovators didn't avoid sharing because they were secretive. They avoided sharing because they were strategic. Tried that when you study the pattern of truly transformative achievements, you notice something fascinating. The people behind them often maintained what appeared to be an ordinary life while doing extraordinary work. They didn't feel the need to signal their future success. They didn't seek validation for incomplete visions. They focused all their energy on the work itself, knowing that real results would make more noise than any announcement ever could. Think about the difference between potential energy and kinetic energy in physics. Potential energy is stored energy, the energy of possibility. Kinetic energy is energy in motion, the energy of action. When you talk about what you're going to do, you're dealing in potential energy. When you silently do the work, you're converting that potential directly into kinetic energy. But there's an even deeper level to this principle. When you work in silence, you develop what we might call deep resilience, say, the kind that comes from within rather than being propped up by external validation. This is the difference between a tree that grows in the open, constantly battling the wind, and one that grows in a protected space until its roots and trunk are strong enough to withstand any storm. The hardest part about moving in silence isn't the silence itself. It's resisting the constant urge to prove yourself to others before you've proven yourself to yourself. In a world that seems to operate on the principle of picks, or it didn't happen, choosing to work quietly, consistently, and without fanfare can feel like swimming against the current. This resistance comes in many forms. It's the temptation to post about your new business venture before you've made your first sale. It's the urge to share your fitness journey before you've established a consistent routine. It's the desire to announce your creative project before you've produced anything substantial. Inchke's moment's presence a choice. Do you want the temporary satisfaction of acknowledgement, or do you want the lasting power of achievement? Do you want to be known for what you're going to do, or do you want to be known for what you've actually done? Here's what most people miss about the relationship between silence and achievement. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. You begin to hear your own intuition more clearly. You notice opportunities that others miss because they're too busy announcing their intentions. You recognize patterns that only become visible when you're not distracted by the noise of constant communication. This heightened awareness becomes a competitive advantage. While others are busy crafting the perfect announcement of their intentions, you're quietly gathering information, testing approaches, and building momentum. While they're managing perceptions, you're managing progress. Think about how this plays out in the real world of achievement. When someone announces their big plans, they create certain expectations. They have to show consistent progress. They have to explain every setback. They have to maintain appearances, even when things get tough. They have to deal with unsolicited advice and opinions. They have to manage others' disappointment. If they change course, but when you move in silence, you get to progress at your own pace. Learn from setbacks privately. Adjust your approach without explanation. Filter advice based on results, not opinions. Pivot when necessary without justification. The power of this approach becomes even more apparent when you're working on something truly innovative or different. New ideas, like newly planted seeds, need protection from the elements while they take root. They need space to develop their own strength before facing the winds of public opinion. Consider how many great innovations were initially met with skepticism or outright rejection. If their creators had sought validation before their ideas were fully developed, many of these innovations might have died in their infancy. Instead, they chose to work quietly until their results were undeniable. This principle applies equally to personal transformation. The most powerful changes often look like nothing at first. They're invisible to others because they're happening at the foundation level, in your habits, your mindset, your daily choices. By the time these changes become visible to others, they're already unshakable. Let me share something profound about the psychology of silent transformation. When you remove the external validation from your growth process, you're forced to develop internal validation mechanisms. You learn to trust your own judgment, to measure progress by your own standards, to find motivation within yourself rather than from others' reactions. This internal validation system becomes a superpower. It makes you resilient in the face of criticism because your sense of progress doesn't depend on others' opinions. It makes you persistent in the face of setbacks because your commitment isn't tied to external validation. It makes you authentic in your pursuits because you're no longer performing for an audience. Think about the most impressive achievements you've witnessed, the ones that seem to come out of nowhere and left everyone asking, how did they do that? Notice how often these transformations happened quietly, gradually, away from the spotlight until the results were too obvious to ignore. These achievements share a common pattern: quiet preparation, protected development, focused execution, undeniable results, natural revelation. The revelation comes not through announcement, but through evidence, not through declaration, but through demonstration, not through words, but through undeniable results. Creating a space where your only competition is your previous self, where your only obligation is to the work itself, where your only measure of success is the gap between what you know you can do and what you're actually doing. The world doesn't need more announcements of intention. It doesn't need more declarations of future success. What it needs, what is always needed, is people who quietly do the work, who silently build their dreams, who unobtrusively change the world, not through proclamation, but through persistent, focused action. Your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, they don't need witnesses to their conception. They need dedication to their development. They don't need an audience for a journey. They need your undivided attention and unwavering commitment. The energy you preserve by not talking about your dreams becomes fuel for achieving them. The focus you maintain by not seeking constant validation becomes power for consistent action. The clarity you gain by not managing perceptions becomes insight for authentic progress. Move in silence, not because you're afraid to be seen, but because you're determined to have something worth showing. Work quietly, not because you're insecure about your goals, but because you're serious about achieving them. Stay focused, not because you're antisocial, but because you understand that real transformation requires uninterrupted attention. Let me share one final truth about the power of silent progress. The world doesn't need to hear about your dreams. It needs to see your achievements. And when those achievements speak for themselves, you'll find you have very little left to prove and very much to share. When you move in silence, you develop what we might call achievement integrity. The ability to maintain the same level of effort, commitment, and focus, regardless of whether anyone else knows what you're doing. This integrity becomes a superpower in a world where most people's efforts are dependent on external validation. Let me share something profound about the psychology of silent achievement. When you stop talking about what you're going to do, you create a vacuum that can only be filled by actually doing it. There's no middle ground, no comfortable space of planning to or about to or getting ready to. There's only action or inaction, progress or stagnation. This vacuum creates a different kind of pressure, not the external pressure of others' expectations, but the internal pressure of your own untapped potential. It's the difference between feeling like you need to do something because people are watching and feeling like you need to do something because the energy of your unrealized goals is building up inside you with nowhere else to go. Consider how this principle plays out in the real world. When you announce a goal, you create a social contract that often becomes more about managing perceptions than achieving results. But when you move in silence, you create a contract only with yourself. And this contract has no room for excuses, no space for performance, no audience to manipulate. Here's a truth that might change how you approach every future goal. The energy required to achieve something significant is finite. You can spend it on the work itself, or you can spend it on talking about the work, documenting the work, explaining the work, and managing people's perceptions of the work. But you can't spend the same energy twice. This is why so many people who constantly talk about their goals never seem to achieve them. They're spending their achievement energy on performance rather than progress. They're choosing the immediate gratification of sharing over the delayed gratification of actual accomplishment. Think about the most impressive transformations you've witnessed, the ones that seem to come out of nowhere and left everyone asking, how did they do that? Notice how often these transformations happen quietly, gradually, away from the spotlight until the results were too obvious to ignore. The power of moving in silence becomes even more critical when you're working on something truly innovative or different. New ideas, like newly planted seeds, need protection from the elements while they take root. They need space to develop their own strength before facing the winds of public opinion. But here's what most people don't understand about innovation and transforming. The most powerful changes often look like nothing at first. They're invisible to others because they're happening at the foundation level, in your habits, your mindset, your daily choices. By the time these changes become visible to others, they're already unshakable. Let me ask you something that might make you rethink your approach to goals. What would you work on if you knew no one would ever give you credit for it? What would you pursue if the only reward was the achievement itself, with no recognition, no applause, no social media likes? Your answer to this question reveals the difference between what you truly want and what you want to be seen wanting. It's the difference between authentic ambition and performative ambition. And understanding this difference is crucial because only authentic ambition has the power to sustain you through the long, quiet periods of real achievement. The reality is that most significant achievements require what we might call dark time, periods of focused, uninterrupted effort, where the only feedback that matters is the feedback you get from the work itself. This is true whether you're building a business, developing a skill, creating art, or transforming your life. During these dark times, the ability to move in silence becomes more than just a strategy. It becomes a sanctuary. It gives you the space to make mistakes without explanation, change direction, without announcement, experiment without justification, fail without audience, succeed without commentary. This sanctuary is where real growth happens, where true innovation emerges, where lasting transformation takes root. It's not about hiding or being secretive. It's about creating the optimal conditions for development and achievement. Think about how different your approach to goals would be if you remove the element of performance entirely. If there was no one to impress, no one to prove wrong, no one to validate your efforts. Only the pure pursuit of what you've decided matters to you. Creating a space where your only competition is your previous self, where your only obligation is to the work itself, where your only measure of success is the gap between what you know you can do and what you're actually doing. Let me share one final truth about the power of silent progress. The world doesn't need to hear about your dreams. It needs to see your achievements. And the more energy you invest in the seeing part, the less you'll need or want to invest in the hearing part.